They told you she wanted a nice guy, a listener, a protector, a man who remembers her birthday and texts back in minutes. And maybe, for a moment, she does. But beneath that surface, beneath the soft smiles and carefully curated captions, something else is watching you. Something older, something ancient. It doesn't care that you open the door. It doesn't care about your playlist, your cologne, or your poetry. It only asks one question. Can he handle my storm? Because what no one told you is that inside every woman lives a war, a battle between the girl she was told to be and the force she was born to be. She's not confused. She's divided. And you? You walked in thinking you were applying for love, but you're standing in front of a mirror, being measured for power. Freud never tried to villainize women. He tried to decipher them. He saw that female desire wasn't weak or soft or fragile. It was volcanic and dangerous, and often self-denying. Because she's not just trying to love you. She's trying to survive you, to test you, to watch you collapse under her silence, so she can feel something real. Think back to history. When empires fell, when villages were burned, and kings were dethroned, what did the women do? They didn't escape. They adapted. They married the enemy, bore his sons, built new homes from the ashes of their fathers. Not because they were heartless, but because instinct isn't sentimental. You call it toxic. She calls it finally feeling something. When you show softness too soon, her body pulls away. When you reveal your heart before she's earned it, she starts to disintegrate. Not because she's cruel, but because her unconscious doesn't trust peace. It's only ever learned to respond to pressure. You are not dealing with her preference. You are dealing with her programming. That's why she keeps texting the guy who ignores her. Why she ghosted you the moment you opened up. Why her "I miss you" is always followed by a withdrawal. She doesn't crave kindness. She craves gravity. And she will throw everything at you. Her fire, her fear, her fury, just to see if you'll break or hold. What Freud taught wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. A woman doesn't want to feel safe. She wants to feel claimed. She wants to feel the presence of a man so rooted in himself that her chaos bows in silence. Not because he demanded it, but because she couldn't move him. Not with words, not with games, not with seduction. So when she pushes, you don't explain. When she tests, you don't flinch. When she disappears, you stay still. Not for her, but because you are no longer negotiating your masculinity for affection. You understand now. She is not rejecting you. She is reacting to the power inside you that doesn't need her. And that, more than any compliment, any rose, any whispered promise, is what wakes her up. She looked at you like you meant something. She laughed at your jokes, shared her fears, maybe even cried in front of you once. You thought she was opening the gates. You thought you were entering her world. But then, it happened. The shift. The texts slowed. The warmth faded. The energy that once clung to every word you said, gone. And the worst part, she gave you no explanation. Now you're stuck in your head, searching every word you ever said. You wonder if it was something you missed, something you should have done differently. But what if I told you? Her silence isn't about you. It's about something far older, far deeper, far more hidden. You didn't scare her away. You touched something sacred, something she buried years ago. Because behind the smile, behind the filtered photos and the sarcastic remarks, there's a girl inside her who never truly healed. A girl who once believed love meant being abandoned. Maybe she was the daughter of a man who was always present, but never emotionally available. Maybe she learned to speak softly because loud emotions made people leave. Maybe she begged, quietly, for someone to notice her, to stay, and no one ever did. So now, when you text her with intention, when you show up consistently, when you offer love without asking for it back, her nervous system sees a threat, not because you're dangerous, but because you're giving her something she never learned to trust. Freud called it the return of the repressed. Emotions we bury don't die, they wait. And when you enter her life with kindness, stability, and presence, you awaken not just her desire, you awaken her terror. So when she pulls away, she's not trying to hurt you. She's not playing a game. She's protecting herself from the flood. Because deep down, she believes that if she lets you all the way in, you'll see what she's been hiding, and you'll leave. You see her stories pop up, the ones you're not in anymore. You notice she's online, but she's not texting you. You wonder if she's found someone else, but she hasn't replaced you. She's retreated to the only place that's ever felt safe: distance. Here's the paradox no one talks about. When you're too kind, too present, too honest, you trigger the parts of her that believe real love always hurts. So she chooses coldness, confusion, silence. Not because they're better, but because they're familiar. That's why she left your message on read. Not because she doesn't care, but because she does. And that cares terrifies her. Her unconscious whispers, "Don't let him see you. Don't let him love you. Don't let him get close." Because closeness means pain. This is how emotional repression works. It doesn't shout, it whispers, it sabotages. It wraps love in fear and ties intimacy to panic. And if you don't understand this, you'll think her distance means you weren't good enough. But you were. You were so good that her inner child panicked. You got too close to the scar. And now, the only way she knows how to feel in control is to run. So here's what you don't do. You don't chase her. You don't perform for her attention. You don't punish her with silence of your own. Because the moment you start needing her validation, you become the boy who once needed his mother's approval all over again. And she stops seeing a man. She sees a mirror of everything she's trying to escape. Instead, you stay still. You stay strong. You let her vanish if she must. Because a woman who disappears when she feels seen isn't rejecting you. She's rejecting the part of herself that finally wanted to be healed. And no man can fix what a woman still feels safer hiding. Let her go if she must. Let her run if she can't receive. Let her keep choosing pain if love feels foreign. And you walk on. Because you weren't just another chapter in her story. You were the mirror she wasn't ready to look into. And that is a power she may never admit you had. She says she needs space. She's confused. She's not ready. And yet, she never really leaves. She still watches. She still lingers. She still replies, just enough to keep you spinning. You tell yourself it's complicated. You tell yourself you can wait. You tell yourself this means something. But beneath all that hope is hunger. Not love, hunger. You think you're obsessed with her, but Freud would say you're obsessed with the lack she represents. Because when she pulls away, when she withholds her warmth, when she gives you crumbs, your mind doesn't say, move on. Your mind screams, don't lose her. Win her back. Fix this. Make her love you. But that voice isn't coming from your masculinity. It's coming from your childhood wound. The one carved by inconsistency. The one shaped by a mother or father who showed love like a game of roulette. Sometimes warm, sometimes gone. And you learned to chase, to earn affection, To believe that if you suffer enough, please enough, prove enough, you'll finally be enough. Now, fast forward. You meet her, this woman who feels different. She's independent, magnetic, mysterious, and just when you start to fall, she withdraws. But instead of walking away, your ID, your primal self, lights on fire. Because she just triggered a memory older than her name in your phone. You're not addicted to her. You're addicted to the sensation of trying to matter. And when she goes cold, your nervous system floods. It doesn't say, "This is unhealthy." It says, "This feels familiar." Freud called this displacement, when we redirect emotions from one source to another, safer one. You're not chasing her. You're chasing the ghost of your emotional past, and she just happens to wear the mask. You want to believe she's special. But what if what you're really feeling isn't attraction, but trauma recognizing itself? She leaves you on red for hours, and your stomach drops. She flirts and retreats, and your thoughts spiral. She tells you she wants something real, but backs away the moment you act real, and you chase harder. Why? Because scarcity creates illusion. The less she gives you, the more valuable she seems. Not because she's worthy of worship, but because your inner child equates absence with worth. And so now, here you are, a grown man, wired to feel desire for what makes him suffer, chasing women who give him just enough to hope, but never enough to heal. Because that's what love always felt like, isn't it? Almost. She doesn't even have to try. Just one delayed response, and you're unraveling. Just one vague message, and you're back in your head wondering, what did I do wrong? How do I fix this? What if I lose her? But pause, and ask yourself something deeper. What part of me believes love is pain? When did I decide I had to suffer for connection? Because the truth is brutal. Until you break this script, you will keep chasing women who remind you of your mother's emotional absence or your father's rejection. You will keep rewriting the same play, different actors, and call it love. But it's not love, it's addiction, to anxiety, to longing, to maybe this time. And she? She feels powerful in your obsession. Even if she doesn't consciously know why, she feels the control. Because when you tie your self-worth to her attention, she becomes your god, and you become her follower. But here's where your power is reborn. You stop playing the game. You stop chasing silence. You stop worshiping coldness, hoping it turns warm. And instead, you walk. Not because she's bad, but because you're finally tired of bleeding for women who can't hold space for your heart. You rise, not by winning her back, but by finally realizing. She was never the prize. Your wholeness was. And now that you've stopped outsourcing it, you're no longer just attractive. You're untouchable. She says you're too intense, that you're too confident, that you're too much. But you weren't too much when she craved your attention. You weren't too much when she leaned into your energy, laughed at your fire, lingered in your arms like a woman finally found. So what changed? You didn't. She did. And not because she stopped feeling, but because she started feeling too much. Most men think rejection means the woman lost interest. But in reality, rejection is often a defense mechanism, a firewall designed to block what the unconscious mind doesn't know how to handle. Freud said we push away what we want most when it threatens our illusion of control. And nothing threatens that illusion more than a man who sees through her mask. Understand this, she isn't afraid of you. She's afraid of the part of herself that wants to surrender to you. Because to let go, to be held by you, to truly feel safe in your frame, would require her to drop the very identity that's kept her alive. She calls you controlling, but your calm terrifies her. She says you're arrogant, but your presence disarms her ego. She accuses you of being cold, but your silence forces her to feel. That's why she lashes out. That's why she mocks your masculinity. That's why she says, "I could never be with a man like you." And yet, she keeps orbiting your life because her words are smoke. But her biology? That's fire. Freud called it reaction formation. When someone expresses the opposite of what they truly feel to protect themselves from vulnerability, she attacks the very traits her unconscious craves: strength, stillness, power, polarity. Why? Because those traits threaten the self-image she's built, the one that says, "I don't need anyone. I'm in control. I'm independent." But here's the catch. Her ego is trying to survive. Her id wants to be taken, and her superego is screaming, "If you let this man in, he'll ruin you." So she performs. She flirts, then retreats. She tests, then accuses. She invites, then disappears. Not to manipulate you, to protect herself from a love she doesn't believe she deserves. And this is where most men fall apart. You take the bait. You defend yourself. You explain. You chase. You try to soften your edge to prove you're safe. But the moment you bend to her emotional chaos, you lose the very essence that drew her in: your sovereignty. She doesn't want to lead. She wants to test the man who does. Because if she can break your center, if she can disrupt your calm, if she can rattle your masculine stillness, she knows you were never strong enough to begin with. And the paradox? She'll never trust the man she can control. So what do? You don't play the game. You don't defend your name. You don't validate her accusations. You simply hold your frame. You let her scream. You let her test. You let her unleash the storm. And you stand in silence, not because you don't care, but because you know her chaos isn't your cue to perform. It's your moment to anchor. Because here's the secret. Every time you stay still while she spirals, every time you don't explain yourself when she attacks, every time you refuse to shrink, her defenses begin to crack. And through that crack, the woman beneath the armor begins to breathe. The woman who secretly longs to relax into your energy, to drop her performance, to let go, not to be controlled, but to feel that you won't be controlled. This is the paradox of the feminine. She wants to be led, but she'll fight the man who tries to lead her until she's sure he can handle her fire without extinguishing it. So don't apologize for your power. Don't dim your light to protect her insecurity. Don't trade your masculinity for access. Because if your strength repels her, she was never ready for the kind of love you carry. And if it awakens her fear, good. Let it. Because now, you're no longer her fantasy. You're her awakening. She told you you were the one. She looked you in the eyes and whispered things like, "I've never felt this way before. You're different. I feel safe with you." She painted visions of futures with kids, vacations, candlelit kitchens, Sunday mornings wrapped in blankets and trust. And for a while you believed it, because it felt real. But then, the switch. Suddenly, you're the villain, the cause, the problem. She blames you for things you never did, twists words you never said, accuses you of energy you never projected, and you're left standing in the wreckage of a dream, wondering, what just happened? Here's what happened. You didn't betray her. Reality did. You see, Freud called this projection, the unconscious act of displacing inner fear, guilt, or shame onto someone else. It's not a lie. It's not acting. It's the psyche's desperate attempt to preserve identity. And in her case, you didn't break her trust. You activated the parts of her that never learned to trust at all. She wasn't lying when she said she wanted love. She meant it. Her id, the raw, instinctual part of her, was drawn to your energy. It wanted warmth, intimacy, surrender. But as the connection deepened, as her fantasy crept closer to becoming real, her superego, that inner critic shaped by trauma, culture, fear, began to whisper, "This is dangerous. He'll leave. This will end badly." And rather than face that conflict, she made you the villain. Because blaming you is easier than confronting the war inside her. So she begins to sabotage. She finds flaws that didn't matter before. She grows cold, detached, restless. She starts talking about how she lost herself, not because you asked her to, but because intimacy requires self-confrontation, and she wasn't ready. This isn't deception, it's disintegration. She didn't fall out of love with you. She fell out of alignment with the image of herself she needed to believe in. So now she needs an exit story. One where you are the mistake. One where you were too much. One where you were never the right man. And if you're not grounded, you'll buy into that narrative. You'll try to fix what was never broken. You'll apologize for truths you never spoke. You'll lower your fire just to make her comfortable in her cold. But listen closely. You are not responsible for healing a woman from wounds she still protects. Freud said repression is the mind's attempt to bury what it can't accept. And in relationships, that buried pain becomes a weapon. She projected her broken beliefs about love onto you. You're distant. You're too intense. You're not who I thought you were. But who did she think you were? A fantasy, a mirror, a salve for her pain. And the moment you became a man instead of a dream, she couldn't hold you anymore. Here's where most men collapse. They try to correct the story, to defend their character, to win her back with logic, with softness, with proof. But the wise man? He exits the theater. Not because he's bitter, but because he knows. You can't win a war that lives inside someone else's unconscious. She needed a shield from herself, and you were it. But now, you see through the illusion, and that makes you dangerous. Because nothing terrifies a woman trapped in projection more than a man who no longer accepts the role she's written for him. So what do? You don't plead, you don't explain, you don't chase. You return to your throne, because her opinion is not your mirror, and her departure is not your failure. It's her unconscious saying, "This love touched a place in me I'm still too afraid to enter." That is not a rejection. It's a reveal of where she truly is. And now, you meet her there with silence, because silence is not just stillness, it's clarity, it's power. It's the sound of a man who refuses to argue with chaos. She will remember your stillness. She will feel it in the arms of the man who bends too easily. She will crave it in the voice of someone who chases her games. She will ache for it when the fantasy collapses again, and she realizes you weren't another man. You were the mirror she wasn't ready to look into. She thought you'd break. She thought you'd chase. She thought, like the others, you'd fold under the weight of her silence, her mood swings, her tests. But you didn't. You stayed calm. You stayed clear. You stayed you. And in that stillness, something happened. The illusion shattered. Not for you, for her. Because for the first time, she met a man who didn't flinch at her fire. You didn't try to win her with words. You didn't beg her to stay. You didn't become smaller just to be accepted. You stood tall in the center of her storm. And that made you dangerous, not because you hurt her, but because you held up a mirror. And she saw herself. Not the version she shows the world, not the curated, filtered, "I'm fine" mask, but the chaos beneath it, the wound, the ache, the terror of real connection. And you didn't collapse. You didn't fix. You didn't bleed for her healing. You simply refused to be moved, and in that refusal, you became something rare, untouchable, not arrogant, not numb, not closed, sovereign. A man who feels deeply, but doesn't obey every feeling. A man who loves boldly, but doesn't abandon himself for love. A man who can witness beauty and still choose peace. You don't punish, you don't explain, you disappear with dignity. Because you've learned the final lesson. The woman who cannot sit with herself will always make you her enemy the moment you sit with her truth. She didn't want to lose you. She just didn't know how to hold you. So she tested you, and you passed, not by fighting back, but by letting her realize that you are not a man who needs to be chosen by someone who hasn't chosen herself. This is the paradox. She wanted to be claimed, but feared the man who actually could, because the one who claims her chaos without flinching, he forces her to confront the one truth she's avoided her entire life. I don't trust peace. I only know how to dance with pain. And when you didn't join the dance, you became unforgettable, because nothing haunts the feminine like the masculine presence that didn't react, didn't chase, didn't shrink, but simply remained. Let her play her games. Let her flirt with shadows. Let her call you cold, toxic, unavailable. She's not speaking from clarity. She's speaking from confusion, from projection, from pain, from a life built on controlling affection before it controls her. But you don't play in that arena anymore, because the boy inside you has finally grown. He no longer needs to be rescued. He no longer waits for her to love him the right way. He no longer believes that pain equals passion. The spell is broken. And now, you rise, you build, you grow. You aim your hunger toward creation, not approval. Your purpose becomes louder than her absence. Your discipline becomes stronger than her chaos. And your spirit becomes so rooted that no emotional wind can knock you down again. This is masculine sublimation, the alchemy of taking pain and turning it into power. You turn rejection into redirection, not toward another woman, but toward your becoming. Because the man she cannot manipulate is not the one who wins her games, it's the one who simply stops playing. Now you're no longer looking for love to fix you. You're not craving connection to soothe the boy. You're not worshiping cold women hoping to feel warm. You've remembered who you are, and now you walk away without noise, not as a punishment, but as a declaration. I don't chase ghosts anymore. I don't fight for fantasies. I don't bleed for mirrors. You don't need her validation, because your silence is now sacred, and in that stillness, you finally meet yourself. Not the version shaped by longing, not the man who begged to be seen, but the king who needed no audience to know his throne. You are not here to be understood by chaos. You are here to transcend it. And as you go, she will feel your absence. Not as rejection, but as reverberation. Because a woman never forgets the man who stayed grounded when she lost herself. She won't say it. She might never admit it. But she'll remember the stillness you held, the silence you embodied, and the sovereignty that refused to collapse, even when she did. This is where her power ends, and yours begins.